Right on, I'm a recovered alcoholic. My name's Tony. I'd like to welcome everybody tonight. My sobriety date's April 8, 1989. Still amazes the crap out of me every time I say that. It's mind-boggling. I mean, yeah. So where we're at tonight, we're going to get into this because this is probably the least understood part of this process, but if you're following along, it's kind of self-explanatory, and people start kind of going, so we're going to kind of look at it, what the book's talking about, right? And we're looking at steps 6 and 7, right? And these are the steps you hear everybody discussing in meetings and everybody's working on. How many heard that? I'm working on steps 6 and 7. I'm working on my defects. I'm working on these things. Well, if you're working on them, you know they're going to be problematic. Right? So where does the idea come from that we're working on these things? It comes from treatment centers, right? As if we were able to fix these things, then we would have kind of took care of it when we did this third step prayer, and that would have been the end of our participation in that, right? So what was the whole point of this thing, right? I think I'm coming down with a bit of a flu, but everybody at work's getting ill, so bear with me. I'm trying to get centered here, not self-centered, but God-centered. So if we kind of back up here, this book has a process to it. So what's the process? So what would we be looking at? So we looked at the purpose of doing step 3. Everybody knew why they had to do step 3 is to have this change, right?
Yep.
But in order to have this change, we found out it was more than just a belief system. We had to have an experience, right? And then it kind of got really interesting on page 63 when we found out that step 3 was an idea. How many people did that kind of cause a bit of argument within themselves?
Yeah.
Right? Because step 3 is an idea. What's the idea? That it's possible to have this experience. What experience? The experience of this thing that these people put together. And what was that? A psychic change or spiritual experience in order for us to recover. Right? And so a lot of people, when they talk about it here on page 63, it says the wording, of course, is quite optional, so long as we express the idea. Right? So what idea? That I was going to move in a new direction. That we were going to abandon ourselves. They talked about making sure we're ready to do it. Abandon, not surrender, right? Not acceptance. Abandon means to move in a new direction, to move from the course I was on, to move in a new direction, right? Are we kind of on the same page with that? We went through that in great detail. And if you haven't heard that before, you're probably arguing with what you just heard, but it's right there in the book. Right? Anybody used to argue with stuff that they heard in the study right from the book? You stop listening then, and then you go formulating and defending the argument in your head based on stuff that you believe to be true. Then you find out it isn't true at all because what it says in the book. So, right? So we found out that even if you back up further, that we only had 2 alternatives. If you're alcoholic of this type, of what type? The type they described on page 44, that in the preceding chapters, we got all the information to make our own self-diagnosis, right? Whether I have this illness or not. And if that be the case, I may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. Not self-fixing self or self-bringing myself to meetings. Or granting myself taking another 24 hours and passing it around, right? That all these catchphrase, bumper sticker, soundbite things in recovery, you should be under the realization, shit, this isn't going to work for me. I'm hoping it works for me because then I don't have to do this stuff, right? Because maybe I'm alone in here. Anybody ever relapse here? Maybe I'm in the wrong meeting. How many? Oh, I'm in the right meeting. Okay. My people, right? So we figure out everything that we've done that made sense to us led to another drink. And then we try to figure out what the hell, right? Then we figure, well, that's alcoholism, right? And people say, untreated alcoholism. Well, we don't treat alcoholism. We have a treatment for it. We don't work on our alcoholism. You hear people say, I wake up with untreated alcoholism every day. Are you in Al-Anon? Because, right? So if you do, that means you're in much danger of drinking again. So we have a solution that is based on those the formula of those that went before us who had recovered from these things. They're no longer dealing with alcoholism so long as they keep in fit spiritual condition. So what they obtained is a psychic change and then a daily reprieve. Are we hipped on that? Are we kind of agreed on that? Right?
Yeah.
So what they get to enjoy is a life beyond anything they could ever imagine based on their relationship with a power greater than themselves. Well, where and how were we to find that power? That's what this book is about. I'm doing the highlights. If you've been following along, you should be in 100% understanding and agreement of these ideas that I'm passing. Because whose ideas are they? They're their ideas. They become the collective experience of all of us having gone through this. Now we're starting to have the same experience. I'm picking up speed here, right? So we're starting to have the same experience they are, right? Before it was an idea that it was possible, but now I begin to have an experience. Well, where did that idea came from? In the fifth step, right? Why are we starting to have an experience now? Because we're removing the blocks. Mm-hmm. What blocks are being removed? Selfish, inconsiderate dishonesty?
No. Resentment, fear, conduct.
Yeah, they're way different, because if it was about selfish and considered dishonest, some of us would never get sober then, would we? Right? Because, some of us struggle with a lot of that stuff a lot, right? So we see it's the resentments, the fears, and the harms, and the conduct that block us off from source, right? And so then when we got to page 71, we started to see here that we're starting to tap into this thing, right? And they're talking from their experience. So they're saying, hey, if you followed what we did, you should be experiencing this. And if you're not experiencing it, then you didn't do what we did. It's that simple.
Yep.
Right? And how do you know if you did what they did? You could show somebody else out of the book what they're talking about. And you did the same process that they did. Yes, comprende? So when Ebby took Bill through this, Bill did the same process that who did? Ebby did. Bill didn't figure this thing out. He got shown a process that worked for Ebby, that somebody showed Ebby, and then he put it into this thing. Once they kind of picked up speed on that, they put it where it was more palatable, where it was more inclusive than exclusive. Right? They took the six tenets and made it into 12. So they moved it more from the Oxford group, so it'd be more, so people like us would be more prone to following it. Right? Because we're pretty defined. Nobody in this group. Anybody?
Not over here. Not over
here. Okay, so then we start going through the fifth step, and then it kind of really reiterates what the whole point of the fifth step was, is to learn certain key ingredients that need to follow us for the rest of our sobriety. And what are these things? On page 73, these are the key ingredients to obtaining sobriety, keeping it. And they're the first things that we lose or stop experiencing before we relapse again. Yeah. Anybody know what those things are? These are the key ingredients to long-term sobriety. It's on page 73, and they talk about what are those things?
Humility, fearlessness, and honesty.
And who are you?
My name's Katie. I'm a recovered alcoholic. Who are you? Humility, fearlessness, and honesty.
Right, so we need to learn those ingredients. The first thing is the humility. You ever notice that? They haven't humbled themselves, right? So we kind of go that. We did the fifth. Things are cool. Right on. Now we're looking at 6 and 7. So when we found out at 75 here, they kind of, about the pocketing our pride. And they talk about the experience that they had and a lot of us had. How many people did the fifth step and kind of could say, yeah, you know what? I have similar along these lines what you're talking about. Because the blocks are removed. Now I've tapped into this inner resource of power that they talked about in the book. The book says, where and how was I to find this power? Well, that's what the purpose of this process is in the book, right? So I should start having somewhat of an experience. So let's kind of start with if on page 76.
Biggest word in the book. If we can answer to our satisfaction, We will then look at step 6.
And what could we ask to our satisfaction? If we did what they did, holding back nothing. So how many people, we already discussed this, how many people here thought they did a fifth before and left most of the stuff out of it?
Just the stuff I didn't want to tell anybody.
How many people? And then how many people got drunk here? And how many people just did a confession and never really found out the blocks that stood in the way of them and a power greater than them? So there's a big difference between doing a confession and doing a fifth step.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't know that if you haven't done this fifth step. So the purpose of this fifth step is to find out the blocks that stood in the way of my relationship and have a new attitude and a new experience with this process. Right? Pretty cool, right? So a confession will make you feel better, but it doesn't tell you anything. How many people's felt guilty here about something where it's eating you up? And you feel all that energy? And you tell somebody. How many people just told somebody about it? And you cried and you felt bad, right? And you felt better about sharing it, but it didn't tell you why you did it or how come it happened or why you're about to do it again. Right? You just... How many people here has done things more than once that they felt bad about? So there you go, right? So we found out it wasn't the 90% of our story that we knew about. It was the 10% that we weren't able to see it from. It's the 10% that caused the 90%. How many people found that pretty wild? So we see it was a self-based living based on my instincts that caused all my problems. So for the first time I see it wasn't God doing these things to me. How many people did that blow away here? Because how many people before the fourth step, it was God doing these things to me. And after the fourth step, we see, no, it's God doing these things for me. Big difference in the conversation. With somebody doing something to you and doing something for you. And that shift in relationships is pretty wild, right? Especially when you make a list of all the things God's doing to you and you come up with nothing. Right? But it saves us from looking at ourselves. So now we have a clear understanding of us. So we swallow and digest the big chunks of truth about us. So what have we been looking at? About the obstacles, about the truth about the stock and trade. How I function on a non-spiritual basis. Yes or no?
Yeah.
Right? So that's why the second half of how it works talks about my spiritual development, not me working on me. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. So I seen what I used to be like, right? Or what I am like, and now I want to become something different. So I have the gauge of what my life looks like on a non-spiritual basis. Now I'm moving into a spiritual way of life. I'm abandoning myself. So I'm now starting to overcome some of the obstacles that were causing me problems before. Anybody experiencing that? And some of those resentments that were eating my lunch aren't eating my lunch so much anymore. And some of those fears that were crippling me I seem to be okay with them. I could cohabitate or coexist with them. They're not crippling me, they're still there at some extent, but they're not crippling me anymore. How many people find that pretty cool? And now I'm starting to work toward the relationship that I kind of discussed in my 4 and my 5, for the future that I established that I want my life to look like with people, places, and things. And I start working toward that idea that I got from where? From the 4th step. So a lot of people say, I've done the 4th step. Oh, good. What's your idea for a relationship for the future? They go, what? So you didn't make an idea for the future, what you want your relationships to look like? And a willingness to work toward it? A lot of people miss that exercise. So, if we can answer to our own side, we then look at. What does look at mean?
And to look at it.
We look at it. Didn't say work on, does it? We're going to look at what? The next part of the process. We're going to look at something. Doesn't mean you're buying it. You're going to look at it.
Don't touch it.
Just
touch it. Look at it.
Yeah. That's the key word, isn't it? We then look at. It's really interesting. That means you need to, again, assess. If you're going to look at something, if something, you're about to do something, well, let's look at this part before we move on. Does that kind of make sense? When I hook up the trailer, before I move forward, I need to make sure all these things are in place or done, or a checklist of things. Does that kind of make sense? I'm looking at it. Mm-hmm. I've already done all the work. I'm ready to move on. So let's look at what? What are we looking at?
We look at step 6. We have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things which we have admitted are objectionable?
Question mark. What are all the things we admitted are objectionable?
The things that we just wrote about.
Yeah.
Talked about.
Yeah. The resentments, the fears. Most people say, oh, this is my selfish, inconsiderate, and dishonesty. Well, the basis of that is a self-willed person based on your instincts. So if your instincts are out of whack, doesn't matter how much you work on yourself, you're just fooling yourself. Anybody ever act kind here and cause themselves problems? Anybody?
Yeah.
They talk about that in 63. On one hand, we can be kind, considerate, and so loving and thoughtful. And the show doesn't go our way, so we punish them. We get them into working, right? The beatings will continue till morale improves, right? So we see we really can't trust us based on a self-directed person, because we could be very manipulative. Nobody in this group, right? And we could be very self-pitying, can't we? Right? We could go from resentments to beating other people up in our mind to beating ourselves up. We don't need help doing that, do we? How many people talk shit to themselves here all the time? Nobody put up their hand. Kind of went. Okay, so we do. Our brain's not very friendly, is it, to us?
Nope.
Or other people. So we know what that shit looks like now. We got it all down. I talked to another human being. Okay, another human being. So I see the destructiveness of these resentments, these fears, and my conduct. Yes or no?
Yeah.
These are the things that are blocking me off and causing me all my problems. The vehicle secondary. Right? Okay, go ahead.
Can he now take them all, every one?
Every one of what? My resentments, my fears, and my harms in conduct. Mm-hmm. Can he now take, right? Because of these things that are eating my lunch, if I'm still hanging on to it, that means I'm not eating alone anymore. These people are still eating with me. Anybody? Mm-hmm. And we see that as long as we permit these things, so we see that a lot of them we have no problem letting go of, right? Now, this is a tricky one, because sometimes we go, yes, but sometimes as we move from here into 11, we'll go, holy shit, I'm still hanging on to some of this stuff. What? These resentments, these hurt feelings, right? The injustice, all that stuff works the same thing. Fear, indignant. Anybody indignant? Anybody, parents they're still holding grudges against? As soon as they change, I'll forgive them. But for now, and rationalized, justified resistance to change. Oh, some people sat back.
Okay. They're always justified.
I love you. I love you. Everybody's then it's like, okay, right? Anybody? And some people sat up. So, so now just monitor what's happening inside of you as I'm talking. How many people? Whoa. Anybody?
Yeah.
Come on, anybody? That's the step 6 stuff. And you don't know that stuff's there until this stuff comes up. And as you started thinking about these, this is the resistance. Yeah, I want to go this way, but this thing is still attached somehow. There's still some form of energy there. There's a story still stuck to that. But I know that now. Does that kind of make sense? So the question is what? Can he now take them all, every one?
If we still cling to something, we will not let go.
See how that question goes now? Then it goes, well, now you know these things you're still clinging on to, and we know that, and that's okay, right? Because some of this stuff is deep-rooted. Deep.
Yeah.
Right? And that's why they talk about later on, if you read through the book before going through this process, it talks about it takes years to tear down old structures to build new ones in its place. And the goal is if you can get to a place where this stuff is still there, but it doesn't eat your lunch or determine how you react to people, that's pretty awesome. Right? Like my dad and my mom, if I could form a new relationship, regardless of what they did and what happened in my story, well, how do I do that? Because this stuff's there. I'm willing, but I'm resistant. I'm still hanging on to it. So there's got to be some formula, isn't there? There's got to be a formula because I have to be willing. Because if I'm not willing, then I'm signing my own death warrant. Right? Because this will continue to poison me. So that means I have to find some form of shift of these things that I used to hang on to the story that justified who I was and why I did the things that I did. But I can't do that anymore because I want to be free of all that stuff. I want a new story. And I can't have a new story if I'm still dragging around the old template. Right? Yep. Anybody?
Yeah.
Okay, so then if we still cling to something we will not let go, what do?
We ask God to help us be willing.
That's it. So who does the work? Us or God?
God.
So all I got to do is, hey, acknowledge, you know what? I know this shit's still eating my lunch. I know I play this story. I know at certain moments that I make these still people pay without realizing. I know that. But I can't stop myself from doing it. But I'm willing for a new story. I'm willing. And this will go into step 11. This thing here, this block, I'll carry into step 11. And the formula is along these lines. But I have to know what those things are. Because I have to be prepared for when these crop up in 10. They talk about that in 10. When these things crop up, to crop up means they're already there. And why do they talk as we clean up the past? So as I'm cleaning up the past, I have a new story that I'm trying to formulate, but the old story is still kind of there with some people. Anybody? I want to create a new story, but it's just these stumbling blocks within inside of me won't allow me to do that. Well, that's what step 11 is about then. Because step 11 says I review my day. And I look at the obstacles within inside of myself that are still causing me problems or still determining the outcome of my life. Because when harboring such feelings, I shut myself off of the sunlight of the spirit, and I pay the price, even though these people are not around anymore. Because how many people still driven by those emotions and things, then after you feel like shit. But you're driven by it, and you feel rational and justified. Fuck you! Right? Sorry, Pastor, I didn't mean that. But you come. Let's get real, right? Come on, I can't be alone in that.
No, you're not.
So then I go home, I feel bad, and that's the step 11. Says, See, a lot of people say, I still have this resentment. It's not a resentment anymore. It's a defect, a character that you're carrying forward that's determining your outcome still. This shit from the past is still determining your present. Right? If I'm going to be free. So a defect and a character shortcoming is this. Shortcoming is, I know this is how I want to be. But the defect won't allow me to do that. I'm running... shortcoming is falling short of the chosen idea that how I want to be. But this defect is determining something else for me. Where did this defect come from? It didn't come from the factory. It came from when I'm driving. Anybody ever drive a car and they hit a curb with their tire? It creates a defect. And so that defect starts determining, right, how the operation of the car. Does that kind of make sense? And so we realize this, and it's kind of, well, I want to save the money. I want to keep that tire on the car. It's still causing me problems, though. Right? So, okay, go ahead.
When ready, we say something like this. Wait
a minute. So, when ready, we say something like this. Well, what the hell happened? Where's step 7? See the transition there? You notice it didn't go step 6, step 7? How many people notice that? It's a transition. One's a preparation, And the other ones is the, so like step 10 is the preparation step for step 11. Step 3 is the preparation step for 4. 4 is for 5. They're building blocks. 6 and 7 go hand in hand with each other. And so what is it that goes hand in hand? When ready, so I understand the things that are still causing me problems, I'll discover more as I go along, right? In step 11, more with family and friends and people like that, especially family. Holy shit. Some of that stuff, if it gets right size where you're not throwing over tables anymore, that's progress, right? If they're not dialing 911 when you show up anymore, that's progress, isn't it? If people aren't crying when you leave and you're laughing with your finger in the air, that's progress, right? Come on, I can't be the only one to have those kind of relationships. When people start answering your phone on the second or third ring, that's progress. I don't know why. Everybody on phone seems to go to the answering service. Then they phone me back. Well, when you put your key in the door and the people inside the place don't have anxiety anymore, that's progress. Am I talking anybody's language here?
Yep.
When the people around you start experiencing the promises, then you are. If you're the only one experiencing the promises in your life, you're full of shit. Just thought I'd put that out there. Okay, go ahead. When ready.
When ready, we say something like this. My Creator, I am now willing that you shall have all of me.
Got it? All of me. Not some, all. So, remember to play the role he assigns. What does that mean? So I'm saying, well, if you're the director, you're the parent, I'm the agent, that means I'm going to trust you with everything that happens here forward. So all I need to do is keep my relationship right with you. Like, how many people have kids here? Or know people with kids? You notice the parent takes care of everything the kid needs. You ever notice that? Like if you got good parenting, like and able to look after, like when they wake up in the morning, there's breakfast, take them to school, like their whole day. The way it's designed, you wouldn't worry for nothing, would you? And as you're being prepared and getting ready for life, without realizing it, your parent is getting you ready to move out and to live on your own. They're getting you ready for life. Right? They're giving you all the tools necessary to be able to be self-sufficient, to function within the world. Hopefully. And if it didn't happen at home, that's what we try to do in AA. Right? So some of you'll find the longest stretch of puberty you ever went through will be when you sober up. Sometimes the last 15 years for some of us, right? Still in my adolescence. It goes along these lines, right? Okay, go ahead.
That you shall have all of me, good and bad.
Whoa, wait a minute. We're going to cut this down here. What do you mean good and bad? How many people, when they hear people talk about 6 and 7, they just talk about the bad stuff?
Yeah.
Why is it here without realizing the transition of the completion of this thing is good and bad? Why is that? Why did it say good and bad? Anybody give that any thought? Why would they say that? You can have all of me, good and bad. Because most of us just look at the nasty stuff. Well, look, I'm selfish and considerate. So self-loathing again. And what are you doing? Who are you concentrating on? Self. What's the problem? Is the concentration of self. What's our biggest obstacle? Self. What's our first obsession? Self. So that's why these people who don't understand this thing go, oh, now you get to work on yourself. We go, yay, back focusing on self. Well, you're the problem. Right? It's like having a kid in the correctional system monitoring themselves. You know it ain't going to go good. You are now the custody of the penal system. Just monitor yourself. I can do that. I can fix me. What are you doing back here, sir? Well, there was a little misunderstanding at the bank. No, I don't know. This is before you're allowed to wear a mask in the bank. But anyway, you get what I'm saying, right? This be How many people tried to fix it? That's what they talked about in We Agnostics. For mere code, a better philosophy, where self working on self was sufficient enough. many of us would have recovered long ago. How many people work on themselves and find it painful? Because you're now focused on the problem again. Right? So I need to bring counsel in with something greater than me if I'm going to have a different experience, right? Mm-hmm. So that's where the shift in, again, understanding, good and bad. Because when I'm bad, who am I concentrating on? But when I'm good, who am I concentrating on? I'm still concentrating on me. Oh, look how great I am. Oh, it's my second year cake. Let me talk about how wonderful I am. And everybody else, can you please talk about how wonderful I am? Right? And how great I am and how great I'm doing and how far, self. Right? Like, we do a real disservice when we tell new people, you're the most important person here. Some people still believe that 20 years later. So, how many sides are there to a coin? How many people say 2 sides to a coin? There are 3 sides to a coin. Right? And what enables the coin to roll successfully, it's when it's on its side. So if you took a coin, it may sound kind of weird, and you put it in you can't see nothing but the coin. But if you turn the coin sideways, you can still see what's going on. Your vision may be a little obscured, but you can still see what's happening. That isn't your focal point anymore. So the side of the coin would be the prayer. Right? So I'm going to apply prayer to this. So you turn the coin sideways, and that doesn't become your focal point anymore. Well, what does that look like? This is what the third side of the coin looks like. Go ahead.
I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows.
So, every single defect of character that stands in the way of who?
The way of my usefulness to you and my fellows.
So, you and my fellows. So, we see that the shift of focus has changed. My usefulness to you and my fellows. The shift. How am I being an agent? How am I being of service? Right? So, it kind of shifts here. And what shifts here? So, I pray that you now remove from me every defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness, right, to you and my fellows. So, first is to God and then to the people around me. So what are those things? Resentments, fears, and harms. That are usually based on self. That we later find out that the defect is associated with my self-esteem, my personal relationships, my security, my ambition. Some form of self is still hanging on to this thing that is causing me problems. So the vehicle could be, I'm selfish and considered dishonest, but that's just the link in between these 2 problems. It's like, how many people had a toothache here? Well, the pain lets you know that there's something else happening. Right? So the selfishness and dishonesty lets you know that there's something else happening. What's happening is one of my instincts are being interfered with, or something's coming to the surface from my past that's determining my present. Past argument, thought, or feeling. Right? Anybody? Interesting, eh? So I need to deal with the underlying. What's the underlying is I'm starting to get back on a self-based direction again. I'm seeking my counsel on how to solve things. Anybody here? Spend a lot of time in counsel with self?
Just all day.
So it's interesting how much time we spend, good and bad. So now the focal point is the prayer in God. So that's really how much God spends in our lives. If we get honestly, is the side part, because we're thinking about the past, future. We're always thinking on self some point through our day, most of the day. Anybody? And so where do I bring God into this thing? Right? And that's what step 11 is about. Okay, go ahead. Character defect stands in the way of my usefulness to you, my fellows.
Grant me strength.
Yeah, that's it. Grant me what?
Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding.
And so when does that happen? Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. So we're moving in a new direction now, right? I see the obstacles. I see the problems. I see the overconcentration of self. I see the solution is the reconfirming of step 3. So we see step 6 and 7 is the reconfirming of step 3. The difficulties in bondage of self, the overconcentration on me. The solution is seeking power. Right? Grant me strength. What? So I could overcome these obstacles within inside of myself that cause me problems. And my view upon the world. Right? That I can't shift on myself. Because what happens if I don't find a shift, then I'll return to drinking. The insanity will return. I need to find a solution other than the things I was doing that caused me pain. Mm-hmm. That involve people, places, and things. Anybody? And the ultimate sacrifice is drinking again if I don't find a solution for the human dilemma. Right? So now finally they give me a solution for the human dilemma. So then what does it say? To do your bidding. What's that word? Amen. Done. Amen. Complete. Anywhere in there did it say go from here and go work on these things? No. Anywhere in here does it say continue to concentrate on the shit of your past and really bring it up to today? Like just get a big trailer and drag it around with you and just take it out one at a time and work on it. What are you working on this week? Oh, I'm working on pain. Oh, good. How's that coming? Oh, right? You can't say I'm working on these things and experiencing the promises. You hear people say that all the time. I'm experiencing the promises. I'm so happy. Somebody need to inform your face if you're experiencing the promises. Right? You really need, I'm just so amazed. Oh, yeah. If you want what I got, I hope you're trying to get rid of what you got. Like, I mean, come on, people. You'll be amazed, right? So, amen. Then look at the wording here. You might want to underline this for those special people like working on themselves. I'm telling you, that really killed me.
We have then completed step 7.
Completed step 7. You notice it didn't say completed step 6? Yes. It's very tricky, this thing. Because there's some things I'm still clinging on to, but I don't know what they are. Defects of character and shortcomings that I'll carry into 11. These things that need to be monitored. When? On a daily and hourly basis. And when they arise, and when they start changing how I feel or how I look, or my energy, does it say go right about it? No, I stop, step back, and apply prayer and shift my focus. That's pretty wild, eh? When you think about this recipe, it's like I could have instant relief from who? From me. Who's causing me my problems? Me. God's not trying to teach me a lesson. He's trying to free me from me.
Yeah.
He's trying to free me from me. What test would I pass if God was giving me? Think about it. Right? Like sometimes we're kind of like, So how many people got a pen and paper? So, put a dot on that piece of paper. Everybody see that little dot on that piece of paper? Right? Now, anybody got a wall close to them? Hold that piece of paper on the wall. That piece of paper is our solar system. Our solar system. The wall is the rest of the solar systems that we're in. That little dot, right, is the sun. We're beside that somewhere. And on that dot, we're sitting there. On a planet, moving how fast? Fast. And spinning at the same time. And all this stuff is being balanced. And God got up a half an hour before you to mess with your day?
He doesn't like you.
So the thing, right? So there's a higher order of living that's available to us. That's what they talk about, right? Our thinking will be placed much more on a higher plane when we're not being driven by our instincts. So there's the Neanderthal experience, which our fourth kind of looks like, the gathering, the conquering. Anybody? Knuckle-dragging, meat-eating Neanderthal. And now we're moving into a spiritual experience, way of living. And you notice the difference energy when you're living by spiritual principles than you are by living by a Neanderthal. I don't know how else to say that. That makes sense to me.
Definitely.
Right?
Yeah.
So when I'm on a spiritual path, everything looks a little brighter. I'm not looking at my shoes. And I just notice everything sounds brighter, looks brighter, is brighter. But when I'm consumed in self, everything becomes narrow. I could even, next time you feel one of these things from the past or your attachment to a person, place, or thing that's in the present, look at your posture. Mm. Your posture changes, how you sit, how you think. Look at the facial expression. You want to see something funny? Go look at your face when you're concerned with you. Just go look in the mirror and just, yeah, I bet you start laughing. You get there. And then ask yourself, who's doing this to you? And then point at you. You, stop it. This guy, one of my sponsors, Milton, he gave me this sticker. And it said, you're now looking at the problem. I thought, that's kind of weird. He says, go home and put that on your mirror. I said, on my wife's mirror or my mirror? No. I'm just joking. I hope she didn't. If she heard that, I'm going to have to go buy dinner. So, it's pretty well. Is that simple or is that complicated?
It's pretty simple.
It's pretty simple. But why do we come? Because people, they don't understand the process. So if you don't understand 6 and 7, that means you missed something in 5. Mm-hmm. If you didn't do the 5, that means you missed something in 4. And that means you missed something in 3, and then you missed the whole purpose of this in We Agnostics. Because We Agnostics, from page 44 to 63, gets you ready for step 3. And you notice what they talk about from page 44 to 63 is the human dilemma. You notice they stopped talking about alcoholism? So page 44 previous to that, and the spiritual experience, appendix in the back of the book with the doctor's opinion, the first portion of from page 44 previous to that, including the introduction pages, preface and preface, talk about of understanding alcoholism. Now they've been talking about the human condition. And if we don't find a solution for that, the insanity returns. Mm-hmm. Right? Where did they first mention that? In step 4. A few times. And then they talked about that in the 5th step. You may not overcome drinking. If you don't ever overcome the stumbling blocks within inside of yourself to find a solution for these things that are eating your lunch, what is the likelihood of you continuing on this path? That's why they say being willing to go to any lengths. Where are these lengths? Deep down within. So now only you know for sure your relationship with this power. You can talk shit all you want at all the meetings, but only you know if you have found a new peace and new happiness. Only you know if you're at peace with yourself. Only you know if you're willing to apply these prayers and all that. Because in the end, all of us will go to sleep tonight. And only you know whether you're doing this or not. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
Because to our outer world, we present one person, but the change, what we're trying to do here is not wash the outside of the cup. We're trying to let God wash the inside of the cup, which is a big difference, right? So this is pretty wild stuff. So we kind of, now they're going to look at something really interesting. This week is the way the book is designed, right? They're going to ask us, as you read through this, it says, now, we're going to read a bit, and you're going to do some homework this week, but it's really interesting. Go ahead.
Now we need more action, without which we find that faith without works is dead. Let's look at steps 8 and 9.
Let's what?
Look at.
Let's what?
Don't touch it.
Don't touch it. Let's look at it. Don't do nothing. Don't move. Don't move. Let's look at it.
Drop it. Let's look at it.
Yeah. Step back. Okay. Let's look at it. A lot of people say, I got to go do my 8 and 9. No, don't do nothing. Do nothing.
Just look at it.
Yeah. Okay, go. Let's look at it. Okay. Look at what? Okay, go ahead.
Let's look at steps 8 and 9. We have a list of all persons we have harmed and to whom we are willing to make amends.
Right? Don't we? Where did we get that list from? It'll answer itself. Funny.
Hey, we made it when we took inventory.
Oh my God. So maybe I shouldn't have burnt my fourth step. Is that what you're saying? Yeah, that's what it's saying. Right? I should have made a little ship of it and took it to the ocean and set it on fire and let it go. No, you should have it. I still have my first four step. I look at it and I'm amazed I'm still sober. Because it wasn't how much I wrote, it was the willingness to do what was asked of me. So for the mental health that I was in when I got here, I know it's hard to believe that I suffered from any kind of mental health. Put your hands down, right? like sometimes I see when I'm like 32 years sober, right? You can't even imagine. There's some people that like can't even imagine. Like I look back and every time I think, I just give my sponsors and the people that help me through this a virtual hug every time in my mind. I love you. And I pass that forward, right? I sponsor people who are just somewhat like me, right? Just not quite. Okay, go ahead.
Moving on, we subjected ourselves to a drastic self-appraisal.
Really? Drastic, isn't it? It was drastic. Holy shit. It was like a self-administered beating and drastic. It was drastic. Like, I didn't want to look at any of this shit, anybody. Let alone tell somebody else. I didn't know some of this shit. I really didn't. Like, I know it happened, but why it happened was really shocking to me. How many people found that part shocking, that you kind of, one way or another, created everything that ever happened to you? Let's move on. Drastic. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Swallowing, digesting some big chunks of truth.
Yeah. You ever swallow something just to, like, choke on food? Like, that's what we're saying here. And it kind of gets stuck. And you got to drink water to process it. Anybody? How many people experience that? You're like, oh my God. And so instead of water, we use prayer. Okay, God. Oh my God. God says, yeah, I know. I know. No surprises here. I've been trying to save you for years. I'm finally glad you're participating. I know. I didn't think God knew I was hiding. Yeah, I know. I know you know. Okay, let's move on.
We know you know. Now we go out to our fellows and repair the damage done in the past.
Oh, so wait a minute. They go, oh, now. Okay, look, no. Through the process, we have a list. We're going to look at 8 and 9. We're getting ready now. The now is coming. Through the process, we've got to look at 8 and 9 first before we go out to do our amends. Yes? No?
Yeah.
Because how can I go do my amends if I haven't looked at it? So we're getting ready now but there's a preparation for that. Okay, go ahead.
We attempt to sweep away the debris which is accumulated out of our effort to live on self-will and run the show ourselves.
So who created all this shit?
Me.
We did. So we see how we accumulated the debris was on an effort to live on what? Self-will. Oh, that what caused this thing. So most of my problems are caused by resentment, fear, and harms. Yes, no? Isn't that where all the collateral damage is from? Mm-hmm. Resentment, harms, and conduct? Wow. People don't remember you're a little selfish or inconsiderate. I don't remember you didn't open the door for me. That was inconsiderate. But I remember you ripping off my car. You little bastard. Right? Now you want to come over here and talk to me? If I can. Did you got my car back? No. Go ahead. Go ahead.
If we haven't the will to do this, we ask until it comes.
Ask who?
Ask God.
Yeah. To what comes? The willingness to do what? To face these things. That means there's still something happening inside of you, which is step 6 again. Because if I'm not willing to change the story or be a representative of something greater than me, then I'm still being selfish and inconsiderate. But what I'm doing is fear-based, still based on self. Because I'm trying to save my ass and my face at the same time. So,
can't do.
So a lot of people think step 9, 8 and 9 is about you. You hear that in meetings. But if you understand the book, it has very little to do with you now. because you have found a course of action that enable you to start healing, to be free of these things. So what you're doing without realizing it is you're starting to give the people around you an opportunity to heal, to be a demonstration of something greater than you working in your life that in turn may be the game changer in their life, or they may know somebody, say, hey, you know what, I know somebody who's like you, and it's unbelievable what they're like now. They came, made amends, they paid the money back, they did this. It's like night and day. It's not like the same person at all. Pretty amazing stuff, right? So, but the mindset has to be what? Go ahead.
Remember, it was agreed at the beginning that we would go to any lengths for victory over alcohol.
They're reminding us, right? Because a lot of us are feeling better now. Doesn't mean we're getting better. We just started this route, right? A lot of us, I'll know, it was all about feeling better. Anybody, how many people have been there before? Followed by a 24-hour chip. So we missed it again. So remember what they talked about here in Section 7. What did it talk about here? You got to underline that, right? It talked about, it talked about my usefulness to you and my fellows. My usefulness to who? To you and my fellows. Underline that. It's the start of a new conversation of my purpose and direction in my life. You underline that? They're going to revisit that again in a second. Now they're reminding you of your commitment you made in step 3. What did they say in step 3 is, which is a confirmation of 6 and 7, is that we thought well before taking the step. That we could what? Not that we just did the step. We thought well before taking the step. What did it say on page 63 here? Right after the 3rd step prayer. Page 63, look at it. So it's a
let's look at it.
Let's look at it.
What part?
Right after the 3rd step prayer. May I do thy will always. We thought
well before taking the step, making sure we were ready.
Ready to do what? To go through the course of action that was presented us, laid out by those that went before us. We thought well because we know the alternative, if this doesn't happen for me, I'm on a life and death errand here. Remember when we explained that in the 5th step? I need to remember that because my brain will trick me. The narrator will start talking shit to me. Well, you're feeling better. Let's not get carried away. Right? Anybody have that narrator start talking shit to you? And it's kind of like, wait a minute. I better remember that I'm not cured of alcoholism here, nor have I really obtained this thing. I'm just starting. Because you hear people say, oh, by the time you get to step 10, sanity will have returned. How many people has heard that? It doesn't say that. It says by this time. By what time? And we'll explain that when we get there. People take things out of context, right? So that means if we all got to read step 10 right now and we started working, does that mean we're all restored to sanity? No. Somewhere along the line, this change will take place. Where do we get that understanding of the timestamp? Was in the spiritual appendix in the back of the book. What usually takes a few months is a timestamp. So they're saying this thing should be almost halfway through within a few months. You'll be amazed before you're halfway through. So by the time I start this thing, and by the time I start making amends and being through most of them and living in 11 and working with other people, should be within a short period of time. With good sponsorship, that's what usually happens. And if you don't have the desire to do that, then you usually miss something. And it's usually in the 3rd step, right? Your understanding of what you're up against, or you weren't honest in your 4th step, and you didn't really do a 5th step. So 6 and 7's already gone to shit in a handbasket, right? Because you have no formula to overcome self. You're still stuck on you, right? There's no mediator with that prayer, is there? There's no that intuitiveness, that small voice that says, hey, you know what? We better go forward. God, give me the strength to do this. I'm feeling a lot better than I was before I started this course of action. I'm starting to have a different experience. I want more of this stuff. We're that type of people, aren't we? Oh, this feels good. Can I have more? Yeah, we can have more. The only limitation to this whole thing is us, isn't it? So I hope for you guys, the phenomena of craving for recovery, that once you have a bit, you want more. We're kind of more like people, aren't we here? Anybody? Oh, that was good. Can I have more? Yeah, please, sir. Right, okay. So let's go back. I had a moment there. You're supposed to reel me in. Okay, so...
You're too far gone.
That's it. So let's go back to 76. We're going to finish the idea here, right? So we're looking at 8 and 9, right? Remember, it was agreed, reminding us of our commitment, squiggly writing.
Important, the most important stuff.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
We would go to any lengths for victory over alcohol. Probably there are still some misgivings as we look over the list of business acquaintances and friends we have hurt.
Ready? As we look over the list.
Yeah.
As we look over the list. So we're just reading about this. Nothing's happening yet, is there? They're talking about the next phase here. Right? Go ahead.
We may feel diffident about going to some of them on a spiritual basis. Let us be reassured. To some people, we need not and probably should not emphasize the spiritual feature on our first approach. We may prejudice them. At the moment, we are trying to put our lives in order. But this is not an end in itself. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us.
That's it. That's the whole purpose now. So when I understand that, my 9s make a lot more sense. Didn't say it'd be easy. Didn't say I'd have an anxiety. Didn't say I'd have fear. What it says is that these things would be possible if I brought God into it.
Yeah.
So here's where I see, if I'm going it alone, I won't be able to overcome the stepping blocks within inside of myself. If I'm willing to pray and ask for strength to face these things that I couldn't do on my own, and ask for God, like when I do, we'll go through the recipe here, but it's really cool by the time we read. So this week, read through it and see what step is the next step to work on as we clean up the past. So read through this. Read up to page 80. Oh, let's just go to 85, right at the bottom. So from here, from page 77 to 85, see what it's really saying. Not what you've been taught. See what it says, what our next actions are to be. So we're looking at 8 and 9. So they're going to give us their experience on some of the obstacles or stumbling blocks they had before we start going out. Right? They're going to talk about some key aspects, which is step 11, all the way through their process when they did 9, and they're preparing us for another part of our process or development. Let's see if you guys could figure that out this week, okay? So what is the next step in our development that they want us to participate in before we start doing our 9s? Does that kind of make sense? So something needs to be happening before I start doing step 9. Let's see if you guys could see what it says about that. Live long and prosperous. I had a great time today. Some of you may have had as much fun as I did, but some of you kind of I need to look at this shit in step 6 again, but we'll look at that next week. Love you all. Thank you.